Hey everyone, welcome to session 86 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. I have a really quick intro here. I recorded this episode live, if you will, at the recent Association for Behavior Analysis International Conference, and I'm pleased to be joined by Jonathan Tarbox and Kristen Lancaster. The topic for today is all about work-life balance, something that is sometimes hard to come by in our field. So I want to get you to that episode right away. We are sponsored today by Go Lotus. And Go Lotus is an intuitive, easy to use, and dare I say, beautiful digital management system. It does everything from practice management to data tracking, scheduling, billing, and more. So it's so simple. Your entire team can be up and running in less than an hour. We'll hear more about them later. But if you are impatient, you can go to golotus.com/register, and there's some discounts, etc., that are available by using the promo code MATT. So go check them out at golotus.com. So, I don't want to really take too much away from the conversation, and let's just kind of get into it. So without any further ado, please welcome Jonathan and Kristen.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Kristen Lancaster and Jonathan Tarbox, thanks for joining me today. Coming, at least, it's not released live, but at least we're recording live here at ABAI 2019. If you hear something in the background, that's just the ambient noise that's coming from the Hyatt downtown here in Chicago. So, guys, thanks again for joining me today. So I'd like to start. Jonathan, you're a familiar name in the podcast. Your show, I think, has been downloaded. It's the 5th most downloaded show that we've had out of all 85 shows that have been released thus far.
Cool.
So it has certainly contacted an audience. So, what I guess I'd like to start with is just what's been happening with you since you came on the show. You know, I know that was a pretty impactful episode talking about ACT and things like that. So what have you been up to since?
Sure, just more of the same, getting the word out there on ACT, doing trainings. I'm actually producing a lot more data now, which is really exciting. So I've got grad students producing some data and some treatment evaluations and research projects, implementing ACT in the context of coaching for fitness and nutrition and parent training and actually working with kids with autism now, using some of the ACT procedures. So I'm not going to bore us with that today, but that's sort of the newest developments.
Oh, wow.
And then the big thing is the special issue on diversity and equity that's coming out in Behavior Analysis and Practice, for which I'm the editor of the journal, but I'm not the editor of the special issue. We got Jennifer Zarconi and Matt Broadhead as the guest editors. That issue is like ridiculous. We got, I think, something like 60 submissions or something, way more we could possibly handle. So that's going to be published in September, and so that's really, really exciting. We're really proud of that work. We've got amazing selection of submissions from people from all over the place, from all kinds of backgrounds, and it's really cool.
Oh, lots of fun stuff going on for sure. There's so many follow-up questions I'm tempted to ask, but that's going to take us way off topic. So, Kristen, I want to say hello to you. Why don't you take a minute to tell us about your background, and we got to dive deep into Jonathan's backstory when he first came on the podcast. So I'd like to extend that to you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into behavior analysis, and how that's tying into our topic, which I haven't really even talked about yet.
Okay, sure. I think we're going to be talking a little bit about balance today, and or at least the illusion of balance between family life and work life, and in my case, school life. So for me, that all started when I had a baby at 17. I graduated from high school, had a child about 5 weeks later, and then started college 5 weeks after that. So it's been a process of figuring out how to integrate all of that, being a mom, single mom, and trying to develop a career and grow up all at the same time. So I ended up working as a nanny, and I worked with a child with autism. He was 9. The mom asked for a nanny and recruited me from a nanny resource, but actually really wanted a para. And I had no idea what autism was at the time. This was about 10 years ago. So this was my first introduction, and I had no idea what to do. I knew how to take care of children, but I didn't know how to how to work with him. So it was a learning curve, but also a pretty short experience because I really wasn't skilled yet at all and didn't have resources or guidance. But that family really definitely impacted me, and he introduced me to kind of the world of ABA. In terms of his school, there was a BCBA there, and I remember looking at her business card and her credentials and seeing like BCBA on there, and it's just like, wow, like that's amazing, like that's just so far away from anything I'm going to be able to achieve. And I remember like asking her about it, like, how did you get this credential? And she was telling me, like, yeah, that's never going to happen. But I thought it was really cool. Fast forward a few years, and I was in grad school, and there was a student in class. It was an online program, but on his discussion board post, he really upset a lot of people. He was very direct and very opinionated on some pretty hot topics. And I was very interested in him because he had said he had autism. He was an adult with autism. So I was like, okay. So I kind of connected with him outside of class and developed a rapport with him. And he told me he was also pursuing ABA in our school. And I was like, okay, cool. I went on, I did some research. I probably stayed up all night long looking into that. And I was pursuing a psychology degree, master's in psychology degree at the time. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Like this for sure. I know that it meets all the needs. And I had no idea what I was going to do up to that point. And this was probably a year into that program. And so I applied the next day, and I started my ABA coursework, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So what are you doing these days for work? So take us up to the present tense, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. I work for PBS Corp. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're pretty big nationwide, and now we're in Canada too. I'm a senior behavior analyst, so in Central Florida where I live in Orlando. I spend about half of my time doing supervision for clinical work and working with clients and overseeing cases, pretty standard. And then the other half is supervision of students and mentoring new BCBAs.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So that'll probably tie in very well. I guess one of the things I was thinking about in preparing for this chat here is how we came up with this topic in the first place. I think there's been a lot of discussion in the Facebook groups and things like that, especially in like the Confessions Facebook group. And things along those lines. And then, I don't know, the last several weeks have been pretty busy for me, so it's hard for me to kind of connect the dots together. But I just remember you guys reach out to me, hey, let's sit down for a podcast. So what was the impetus, Jonathan, from your perspective for tackling this topic?
Yeah, well, so it was some Facebook group or thread that I can't remember, but somebody posted a very brave just sort of post about, hey, I don't know how to balance this stuff with work and family life and being a mom, grad school, and all this other stuff. And so I chimed in and just sort of shared some of my, because I absolutely share the same struggles. And so I chimed in with some of the strategies that I've come up with, not to tell other people to do what I'm doing at all, but just to kind of share what's worked for me. And so then Kristen said, gee, you should really write a paper about this. And then I said, gee, you and I should really do a podcast. Let's talk to Matt. Let's see if we can get him to bring us on. And so that's where that came from.
All right. It's coming back to me now. Yeah, one of the things that, it's been a topic we've touched on a little bit on the show here and there. And a couple of years ago at New Hampshire ABA, I participated in a panel, did a brief presentation on, what we were calling self-care. And one of the things that influenced my thinking about that was in one of the Pat Fryman episodes. I think it was session 16. I've got the quote pulled up here. I don't want to do it from memory because it's so Pat Fryman worthy, but he said something like, behavior analysts get depressed, behavior analysts get divorced, behavior analysts get anxious, behavior analysts have trouble with their kids, they have trouble with their marriages. And the funny thing is, this is me, not Pat, saying, and then he goes on to say, and what they encounter when they encounter real trouble in any of those domains, they don't go to behavior analysts for help. And so I always love that quote, and more so the first part of it than the second part of it, in terms of just recognizing that, the everyday problems that people encounter, we encounter it too. When I'm talking to lay people and about behavior analysis, they say sometimes, well, your kids must be the most perfectly behaved kids in the world. I'm like, Not exactly. I'm very happy with where they are, but do they have difficulties from now and again? Do they argue? Do they bicker? Do they do stupid things that kids do that we all did? Absolutely. So being a behavior analyst does not inoculate oneself from life's difficulties for sure. So having said that, one of the getting back to the term self-care. This is the term itself does kind of bother me. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Because when I see people talking about self-care, particularly in the Facebook groups, there's always some sort of like pictures or memes or things like that attached to it. And so like the I guess pop culture notion of self-care is going to a spa or getting a massage or having a glass of wine or several or whatever it is, and when you really look at self-care from that aspect, that seems more like experiential avoidance than anything else. So the term self-care has been kind of a trigger word, and it's I didn't really know that until my colleague Jen Ferris pointed that out to me. And so now every time I see it, I'm like, it's self-care, no, so. But what do you guys think about that when you guys see people talking about these sorts of things? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. As far as the notion of self-care and what we see on social media, I think it can be a little bit skewed, and it does look a lot like experiential avoidance. Self-care for me isn't a glass of wine, and it isn't a bubble bath, and sometimes it's a massage. Sometimes it includes that. But it's a lot more about looking at all of my needs as a person, and I try to see that through the eyes, my eyes as a mother. So when I look at my children, what are their needs, and how do I care for them? Their medical needs, their educational needs, their emotional needs, everything, and then looking at myself through those same lenses of what do I need in order to be my most whole and complete self.
That was the perfect answer. I have nothing to add.
All right.
No, but actually,
said Jonathan Never.
No, I do. No, I do want to echo what Kristen said, and it's funny because you basically, without saying these same words, you're talking about perspective taking, that you look at yourself in a similar way that you look at other people whom you love, right? If you're doing a good job at self-care, right? So like, how would you take care of your daughter or your sister or your mother? You wouldn't just work them to death and never give them a break. You wouldn't just expect them to get the job done and not have feelings about it, right? You would do what it takes to take care of them and nurture them. And sometimes that might involve a glass of wine or a bubble bath or spa or something, but that's like by no means, you don't just give someone edible, primary reinforcers for free and just hope that fixes everything, right? So.
And this ties in directly to the workforce and what we do. Oftentimes, I guess it's a privilege and a challenge. It's kind of a double-edged sword. We're privileged to work with these individuals in these vulnerable populations. At the same time, it's very, very challenging. And it can be emotionally draining depending on what the circumstances are. I think we've all worked with difficult cases, and it certainly can take a toll. Certainly the demand for services, the demand to provide those services and to keep up with billable hours and things like that also, creates a lot of stress. One of the things that, getting back to the talk we did at the New Hampshire ABBA conference a few years ago, we did this survey of behavior analysts in New Hampshire, and it was cosmically unscientific. So don't draw any, hard conclusions from it. But, one of the findings that jumped out at me as I was looking at the data is there was something like 50% of the respondents said that their work had adversely affected their life in one way, shape, or form, whether that's through self-reported anxiety or depression or what have you. And so that does create problems as we're trying to provide these services. And obviously, I'd like to get your perspectives on how that affects. The way I see it, it takes a toll in multiple strands. There's a toll on the workforce. There's a toll for perhaps the individuals we're providing services to, and the field as a whole. We're this new field. we want to make sure that we are able to keep doing what we're doing, but if everyone's getting burnt out in the process of providing these services, we're not going to thrive as an occupational field. So how do you guys see this impacting folks?
Gee, there's so much there, right? I don't even know where to start. But I mean, I guess I would say one thing is, burnout is a huge problem. We've got this situation where we get into the entry-level job of therapist or technician or whatever, super enthusiastic, hardworking, and we kind of enter this myth of we have to work unreasonably hard. I mean, I think that's sort of a cultural belief that we have within our field, at least everywhere that I've ever worked, that it's kind of normal and honorable to overwork yourself. And that's kind of a status symbol, is being burnt out, sleep deprived, tired, stressed out, and that almost makes you kind of cool as a behavior analyst if you try to do too much.
Yeah, and I think that's true in many, many occupations as well.
Social work, nursing,
sure, like
cops, firefighters.
Yeah, even in like the training of doctors, the legendary rotations that have been historically thrust upon them in medical school, where there's one podcast I listened to and the guy talks about his med school and like how he would just go for such a long time without sleep, and there's obviously so much more information coming out about how sleep deprivation negatively impacts people both in the short and long term on all sorts of levels. So so I guess one of the things I'm curious about from both you guys, and both guys can take this in any direction you want, but what are the ways that you're seeing organizations tackle this, or perhaps not tackle it? You guys are out there, working with staff, doing lots of cool stuff. So whether or not you see a well thought out intervention to either prevent or respond to this sort of thing, what are you seeing out there in your daily work as far as staff members being I don't want to say overworked, but stressed out? Now, I don't want to say overworked like companies are being unethical in terms of the pressures that they're putting on people, but more it could be from a combination of sources, whether the things that we talked about, some of the interpersonal difficulties we talked about a few minutes ago, or what have you. Are you ready to make the leap from pen and paper into the digital world? Or are you frustrated by your current system? Well, I recommend you go check out Go Lotus. Go Lotus was created by a product development expert who spent years building systems for Apple and Microsoft before her child was diagnosed with autism. By creating Go Lotus, she had one mission in mind: to create a platform that could help therapists better treat their kiddos by providing a tool that allows them to focus on the actual work and not the paperwork. Go Lotus is an intuitive, easy to use, and dare I say beautiful system. It handles every aspect of practice management, from data tracking and automatic soap notes to scheduling and billing. It's so simple your entire team can be up and running in less than an hour. For more information, go to golotus.com/register. And by using the promo code MATT, the first 100 people will receive 90 days of our data trackers completely free. And by signing up, you'll then receive an additional 25% off the first 12 months. So again, for more information, head on over to golotus.com/register.
Yeah, that's kind of tough to answer, because I don't think that I know of any company that addresses this very well. PBS is a fantastic company, a wonderful company to work for as far as focusing on quality of work life, and really valuing the employees and every single person in the organization. So I can't say that they're necessarily not addressing it, but I don't think that it addresses some of the more personal issues that show up whenever you're overworked and the contingencies for working more are in place. And I do agree with you about the status symbol. It's something I've become very aware of. I hear a lot. I get a lot of personal feedback says, I don't know how you do it. And, oh, you're such a superwoman. You just want to be super. And I'm like, no, actually, I really don't. And I'm really upset that this is the persona that I'm putting out there. So I've tried to modify my online behavior a little bit to be to model what I what I would actually like to get out there, which is to try to keep things quote unquote balanced. That doesn't mean I have it all, because I don't at all. But as a supervisor, I can say that I definitely do push it with my students and BCBAs and BCABAs that I work with. Push them not to take on more than they can handle. We always have that conversation, giving them the leeway to say, if this isn't working for you, you do not have to stay in it. Like, you have options. Because I have found, I've been in situations where I've had analysts want to leave the field completely because they were working with a client that they were getting hurt with, and they didn't think that they had an out, so they were going to just out the whole field. And I think that happens. It's a tough field. It's emotionally and physically draining.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely don't want to see people exiting the field not of their own choosing,
So one thing, I mean, I also, like Kristen, have never seen any place of employment get this all figured out perfectly, by no means. One thing that seems like organizations try to do is like a retreat once a year, and that's kind of helpful. It's team building, it's morale building and stuff, but I don't think it could possibly be a real solution. We know nothing works if you do it once a year, right? For in any aspect of human behavior. So unless there's some actual intervention in the culture of the organization that's happening there, and then carried forward through some kind of maintenance work or something like that, I don't think that the once a year, let's all get together and have wine thing is a real solution. I think it's great. Believe me, invite me. I want to go to that. But I don't think that's a solution. But what I have seen start to work more and more is people implementing small pieces of ACT for staff and ACT for organizational culture interventions, just a little bit here and there. For example, every organization has staff meetings, right? Where you get your staff together and you talk. And let's face it, most of the meeting is boring, like admin stuff that no one really appreciates. But if and you try to do some clinical tidbit of here's how we could do stuff better clinically, and that's what people really care about. And so what we've tried to do at First Steps is just do a teeny little bit of something based on ACT, usually incorporating values. Even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes to open or close the meeting, can have a really, really powerful effect. And if you do that on a regular basis, then it actually affects the culture overall. And I think that it can carry forward. So for example, one that my wife, Courtney Tarbox, made up was really cool. She said, she asked all the staff to think about the first client that they worked with, that they really made a difference for, and imagine that kid. And now imagine, fast forward, that kid's high school graduation. And maybe they're best outcome kid, indistinguishable from peers, or maybe they're still severely affected, but they've made huge progress. And now they have a communication system that works, and they don't have as much problem behavior. And they're walking across the stage getting the diploma, right? Just imagine that. And then here's the cool part. She said, and here's this for me. And she showed the next slide was pictures from her first client that she worked with, and then picture from his high school graduation, right? Are you right? Me too. I'm getting goosebumps right now too. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and all the staff are like, holy shit, this is my purpose. This is why I'm here. This is why I sit in traffic, right? This is why I feel this stressed out. It's not for the paycheck, and it's not to follow the rules. It's to connect with that level of meaning and purpose in my life. So that, look, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it transforms. So I think there's stuff that people can do. I think it doesn't take a huge investment. It doesn't require a ton of money or total restructure of the whole organization.
Well, I'm left a little speechless after that example. That was pretty moving. One of the things I was thinking about is what are ways, what are some ways that we can kind of survey staff members to kind of see what's going on. I know there's a couple of things out there like the Maslach burnout inventory. I think there's probably isn't there the workforce AAQ or something like that in the ACT world? I think there's.
I would think so, but I actually don't know. I'm not sure. We have to ask DJ Moran about that, or Frank Bond, or one of those guys.
Yeah. So that might be something too, to kind of take the organizational temperature of what's going on in a particular company. So, but certainly interspersing those types of activities seems like it had a profound impact, at least with regard to that example. So I think what we're doing is kind of dancing between kind of big picture organizational stuff and then personal strategies that we use. So let's kind of dial in the focus on the latter here. So, Jonathan, you have the microphones, so I'll just ask you to take this first. So, what are some of the boundaries that you enforce right now? And if you can recall also when you actually created those rules, or if there was a particular event or anything like that said, I need to do this, or I need to create this, a boundary or limitation or what have you, or something like that. So if you're comfortable sharing some of those,
sure,
that would be great.
Yeah, sure. And I guess like the first thing that comes up for me when sharing advice is immediately, because of how our culture has raised us to compare ourselves to other people and to judge ourselves and others, immediately as soon as I say something, everyone listening says, well, he's implying that I should do that, or he's better and I'm worse, or I'm better and he's worse, or that makes me bad and that you know what I mean? All of that verbal
Frames,
behavior, all that deictic relational framing that's not helpful. So I just want to preface this by saying, like, I'm not saying this is appropriate for anyone else, and I definitely don't have it figured out at all. This is an N of one experiment, and I'm very much a work in progress.
Okay.
But
disclaimers made.
Yeah. So this case study, I'm a case study in overachieving, trying too hard, doing too much, always saying yes. And the thing is, like, it worked. That's the problem, right? So I was engaging in a behavior that I think was kind of a problem behavior, and it worked professionally. Like, I got all these opportunities, and it's awesome, and it's really cool, and I have nothing to complain about, right? And honestly, like, when I'm evaluating my own life right now, that's not right. Like, I'm not happy with it, Like, I want more balance. No, I'm not going to say it like that. I want to spend more time with my kids and maybe a personal hobby here or there, right? And I want to spend less time working. It's just that simple for me. So, I really started to come to terms with this over the last couple years. I don't remember exactly when. And so, I set some boundaries. One boundary was one travel trip per month. And I'm just not going to be away from my kids more than that. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter. My 15-year-old's fine. He wants me to go at this point. But my 7-year-old and my 4-year-old daughter, the day before yesterday, my 7-year-old said, I want you to stop going to conferences. Can you just not go to any more at all? And breaks my heart, right? And I said, well, no, actually, it's my job. I have to. And this one is the longest one of the year. It's 4 or 5 nights, and it's the most important one of the year. It's my job. I'm going to go. I have to go. And I will say no to more other conferences that are optional. So the 1 per month thing is a deal. 1 international trip per year, because just international trips just involve more time. It ends up being a week, even if it's not a week, You
burn a day either way.
Right? Yeah. And so I feel pretty good about those. Even that feels like a little much. Maybe I'd rather do like 10 per year instead of 12. I don't know, in terms of travel for work. And then the biggest, most important one is, if my kids are awake, my laptop is shut. And there's absolutely no compromise for me on that. And it's actually kind of rigid, right? It's not very flexible. Kids are awake, laptop is shut. Kids are awake, I am not looking at my phone. Like, I will not look. My kids will not grow up remembering daddy looking at his phone. It's just not going to happen. If I need to order a pizza, I pick it up and I order a pizza, and then I put the damn thing down, period. And again, I'm not saying other people need to do this. It's kind of extreme. And the other thing is, there's no screen time for my kids during the work week. Monday through Thursday, they don't look at screens ever. It just doesn't happen. I mean, my 15-year-old has to for homework, but my 4-year-old and 7-year-old, there are no screens that they see. And it's, again, kind of extreme, but it's transformed our life, I think, as a family, and it's totally worth it. So those are the main things that I've done. I do try to stick to them pretty rigidly, and I think, like, that's a gift that I'm giving myself. Oh yeah, one other thing. So this is, I think, a good strategy is I'm collecting opportunities that would have been good for my career that I choose to turn down. So I have a list on my OneDrive, and it's a bulleted Word document. And every time I say no to something because I want to spend that time with my family, I add it to the list. And I check that list every now and then, and it's something I'm really proud of. And it's like one of my favorite behaviors now is adding to that list.
So it's like your own permanent product.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm transforming the function of, like, fearing screwing things up and losing opportunities in my career, which is, like, obviously super aversive, right? Transforming the function to something kind of awesome. Like, I kind of want to ruin my career in the name of saving my family or whatever. You know what I mean? It's not that extreme. I mean, that's, like, crazy, right? But it's basically that same idea. Like, I'm willing to give up important stuff for my career to spend more time with my kids. It's just so worth it.
Wow. Well, I get the travel piece. I don't travel nearly as much as you do, but I had definitely some big time mixed emotions leaving for this conference. And especially where we are in New Hampshire, it's like the opportunity the weather's starting to get nice finally, and to spend some time, especially outdoors, and doing fun stuff with the kids and things like that. This was a hard one to go on, and at the same time I was really psyched because I knew we were gonna do this, and there's all this other fun stuff, and going to OB was just fun in general, and as well as intellectually stimulating and all that stuff. So it was coming here was felt like I was being pulled in two different directions, so I totally get that. The screen time, I'm kind of like, I'm trying to imagine how that would work in my household, and I'm not sure. I think my kids would probably call Child Protective Services on us or something like that. But I certainly applaud you for boldly setting those limits.
Well, and it's easier when you start young. We started that rule when our daughters were 3 and 6, and we already were pretty minimal on screen time. But then when we started the 0 screen time Monday through Thursday, it hurt a little bit at first. And I think we even said that, like, it's okay if this is a little bit frustrating. Like, that's part of this, Let's see what else we can do while we feel frustrated.
Just as an aside, do you get other kids, fill in the blank?
Yeah.
Do they come at you with that, or are they?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is what I say. It's like, yeah, other families make other choices. And the thing is like, how you're not allowed to eat as many cookies as you want because it's junk food and it's poison for you if you eat too much? Same thing with the screens. Like the iPad and the TV, it's poison if you look at it too much. It's bad for your brain. It's great if you have a little bit. It's spice. It's awesome. It makes life better if you do a reasonable amount. But just like junk food, we're not going to let you eat cookies all day. We're also not going to let you watch screens all day either.
Awesome. All right, Kristen. Do you have a set of rigid rules like Jonathan does that you adhere to come hell or high water?
I'm going to give you a very different perspective because
I'm totally kidding, Jonathan.
Yeah. No, I do not have rigid rules simply because I really can't, given that I'm in a PhD program and my schedule. I have a client schedule where I have to go out and see clients at all different times of the week, and actually my motto, or if I have one, would be more like holding it lightly, staying flexible, knowing what's most important to me, and being very connected with my values. And I have to thank Jonathan Tarbox for this, because I went to the ACT boot camp for behavior analysts in Baltimore last year, and it was absolutely life-changing.
Nice.
And Jonathan was a big part of that. And he talked about this stuff too there, about family and figuring it all out as far as your values and all of that goes. So I've done a lot of values exploration since then, and I look at it a little bit more like in this moment, like right now I'm choosing to do this with you guys because this is really important to me, and for many, many, many different reasons. And I'm choosing not to be with my children right now. I'm here and recognizing that, like, in this moment, that is my choice, and I'm sacrificing that time. This is a bigger deal, but that also happens on very, very small levels too, where do I have my phone, and at this very moment, is Facebook more important than talking to my child when I'm taking him to school? No, it's not. So I put it away. So being present, that's what I've worked on the most, and that's what's made the biggest difference. And then also being flexible too with my own expectations. I can be a bit of a perfectionist, so being okay with saying, I might not be able to do my very best on this paper. I might have to turn this other project at work down because I don't have the time, and that's okay. If I get a B, I got a B. It doesn't matter, because there are other things that matter more than that. And so sleep, make sure I get the sleep. I make sure my kids get the sleep. We have family time. We use the little screen time settings on the iPhones. Everybody's on the same page, and it shuts down at a certain time. And but it's hard, and I get a lot of flack from my little one. I have an 8-year-old, and he will say things like, don't go to work. Mommy, do you have to work today? Today's Sunday, so you don't have to work today. I hear things like that, and it's tough. It's so tough because the guilt is real. But in the end, I hope that my kids will see that they can achieve anything that they want to, and that is also so important, and that mommy will spend time with them too.
Awesome. So thanks for both you guys sharing this stuff that's obviously personal and I think they're good examples of things that go beyond, again, the massages and the bubble baths and the things along those lines. So one of the things I want to get back to, the practitioner who might be in a difficult work setting. One of the things I looked at when I started looking into this stuff was there was a paper that it was a book chapter actually by Hayes and like 15 other authors, and I'll put it in the show notes to this episode. But I believe they did they were describing a stress management intervention that they did. This is going back like 15 years, I think. And one of the interesting metaphors that they used was stress was like the water coming out of a tap, right? And that oftentimes, especially with stress that's externally, the source of it is external, is we don't necessarily have an opportunity to control the rate in which the water's coming out of the tap. But you might be able to do something about how fast the sink empties, how you process that. And it was a pretty interesting metaphor. And, of course, they went on to go through, I guess what you would consider, your standard kind of ACT, intervention where people, identify their values, talk about committed actions, blah, 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 blah. So, for the I guess worker who's not particularly psyched about what's going on, I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what your thoughts might be in terms of how do you balance accepting your current circumstances and then, perhaps digging deep to find the value in doing something that may not necessarily be optimal, and I spent a lot of time in public schools, an extraordinarily difficult place to do work and to do good work, and the attrition rate of teachers is pretty high. There's lots of literature that has come to that conclusion, but it's a necessary occupation, and so one of the things I struggle with is that, if someone's working in a challenging environment, how do they balance, do I accept this and do I use these skills to persevere here in service of my values, or do I cut bait? Do you have any thoughts, if someone's driving around their car listening to this and they're struggling with that, how they might go about figuring that out? Because there are going to be some times where you absolutely have to get out of a situation, right? And there are going to be some times where, it might be better off to think through the ramifications, to think through what might be, something that, how you can maybe find meaning in a situation that is, on the surface, not super reinforcing.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Russ Harris has so many materials, and I was recently reading something that he had released, and it talked about how to make tough decisions, which is kind of what I hear you proposing. That's a hypothetical situation. You're not happy with work or something.
Yes, you just took my 5-minute question and boiled it down to its essence. So I think the listener is probably very thankful for that.
So one of the things that he says, he's got a whole script and it's beautiful. I won't go through all 12 steps, but one of them that really stood out to me was recognizing that you have a choice always. So if today I'm not happy at work, but I'm choosing to stay in this job, then I have a decision to make today about what that's going to look like for me and for my clients. I'm definitely a big fan of knowing your options. I usually have a backup plan in pretty much all areas of life because I've learned. So I definitely don't think that anybody should just tolerate and I'm miserable here and I'm not being effective and I'm not happy and my self-care, my mental health is all suffering and I'm just doing it anyway. Not a fan of that. Explore your options and see what else is out there. You might stumble on a great opportunity, but also recognize that right now you're in this moment and you have a choice of how you're going to respond to it right here in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. And that's perfect segue into what I was going to say was, wherever we're at right now in this moment, we always have an option to contact our values. no matter how difficult the situation is. Even if you're going to quit, let's say you're working at the worst ABA agency in the universe, and today's quitting day, right? Even today, you have the opportunity to act in accordance with who you really want to be while you quit. You know what I mean? I mean, even if you are hurting someone, the worst case scenario, even under those circumstances, you have the option to act in accordance with what you really care about and who you really want to be in that moment. And that's the worst imaginable scenario. So our day-to-day just sort of grind where we're stressed out, like right then we have choices. I love that. I needed to read that Russ Harris thing. That's cool. And then the other thing is there's always present moment stuff too. Like, I don't know, what I've learned from the ACT work is there kind of is always something interesting and cool happening, even when you're bored. Like if you hold your judgments of boredom lightly and then look around and just open up a little bit, you'll notice stuff you didn't notice before. And the same thing is true with feeling frustrated. The same thing is true with feeling angry. The same thing is true with feeling tired, you know. I mean, this last semester was probably the hardest semester of my work life, and there were many times at which I said, I can't do it, I got to stop, you know. And then in that moment, I looked around and said, well, I wonder what it would be like to keep working while I was having the thought that I can't do it, I have to stop. And I'm just curious about that. What would that be like? Maybe that would be the hardest piece of work I ever did. Let's try it for the next 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So just kind of try to contact the moment for what it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Good stuff. So I think we hit most of the points that we wanted to cover. Anything else that came up in this topic that we didn't get to in this conversation?
Well, I do want
to
one thing I want to say is I want to give everyone who's listening permission to not feel like you need to overachieve and do it all. You just don't need to do that. You need to do what you really care about in life. That's what you need to do. And if that means just being a kick-ass clinician and not having any name recognition or publications or any of this other nonsense, that's awesome. You're like changing lives, and it's really meaningful and really, really important. If that means spending more time with your family and or being a stay-at-home parent, incredible, awesome. Like, that's really, really valuable, and kind of like what most overachievers kind of wish they had done. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like, what's that? Have you heard that story? Like the little fisherman in the village somewhere. He has a couple boats. Oh, come on. You could really expand. You could buy all these other boats. You could do this. You could do that. You could make millions of dollars. And the fisherman says, okay, cool. Well, what would I do after all of that? And the answer is, well, you just have a couple boats and you'd hang out and you spend some time with your family. Oh, right? Back to what? So, I don't know. I just want to say, like, that's what I've learned is, and I hope that people really take that to heart and don't just think that's kind of trite or something, but like, pick a couple things that you really love and do them well and spend time on them and nurture them and take care of them, you know, whether that's family, hobbies, work, your clients, whatever it is.
Yeah. No one says on their deathbed, I wish I spent more time at the office, right? I love that fisherman story too. I'll try to run down a link to that and put that in the show notes as well. So, Kristen?
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. So my advice would be, and this is really coming from more recent experience, that my 16-year-old has gone through some really tough things in the last couple of years, and it's been a journey of growth, and it's been a journey of turmoil, and it's been a journey of love. And part of that experience for me, given all of the different things going on, it definitely was a values like clarification, micro focusing on what actually matters that happened throughout the experience with him, but also learning that I have a pretty significant community that I didn't realize that I had before, and learning how to accept that help and how to ask for help. That's really hard when you've been doing so much on your own. You're like, you fused with this idea that you're a strong, independent woman, and now you're in a situation where you really need your friends and you need your family, and so being willing to open yourself up to that, if anybody else is like me and kind of struggles with that, that's been hugely impactful for me.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to echo that too. Community. Like, we're all these like mammals running around, like not helping each other. What the hell are we doing? We're supposed to, like, primates are supposed to be hanging out in groups, helping each other, right? Like, what are we doing? That's one of the reasons why I appreciate your podcast, is like you're connecting behavior analysts, while they're driving around by themselves in the car.
Yeah.
On some level, they're connecting with other behavior analysts on things that matter, which I think we could do more of that. Like, be the nerd that reaches out, be vulnerable, like be the one that says, hey, you want to hang out, you want to get a cup of coffee, let's get some lunch, or starts a Facebook group or whatever it is. Connecting, I think, is just so important, so much more important than 99% of what we spend our time on.
Awesome. Well, guys, that's a great place to wrap this up. Thanks so much for asking me to do this. I'm so glad we got a chance to sit down and record this.
Cheers. Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me to do this, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.